Chapter 6 of The Case of the Lamp That Went Out by Auguste Groner, translated by Grace Isabel Colbron. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Almost convicted. The evening was already far gone when Muller entered Riedau's office. "You're in time. The man isn't here yet. The train is evidently late," said the commissioner. "We're working this case off quickly. We will have the murderer here in half an hour at the latest. He did not have much time to enjoy the stolen property. He was here in Vienna this morning and was arrested in Pressburg this afternoon. Here is the telegram. Read it." Dr. von Riedau handed Muller the message. The commissioner was evidently pleased and excited. The telegram read as follows: "Man arrested here in possession of described purse containing 4 10-gulden notes and 4 guldens in silver. Arrested in store of second-hand clothes dealer Goldstam. Will arrive this evening in Vienna under guard." The message was signed by the chief of Pressburg police. Muller laid the paper on the desk without a word. There was a watch on this desk already. It was a heavy gold watch, unusually thick, with the initials L.W. on the cover. Just as Muller laid down the telegram, a door outside was opened, and the commissioner covered the watch hastily. There was a loud knock at his own door, and an attendant entered to announce that the party from Pressburg had arrived. He was followed by one of the Pressburg police force, who brought the official report. "Did you have any difficulty with him?" asked the commissioner. "Oh, no, sir. It was a very easy job. He made no resistance at all, and he seems to be quite sober now, but he hasn't said a word since we arrested him." Then followed the detailed report of the arrest and the delivery of the described pocketbook to the commissioner. "Is that all?" asked Dr. von Riedau. "Yes, sir." "Then you may go home now. We will take charge of the man." The policeman bowed and left the room. A few moments later the tramp was brought in, guarded by 2 armed roundsmen. His guards remained at the door, while the prisoner himself walked forward to the middle of the room. Commissioner von Riedau sat at his desk, his clerk beside him, ready to take down the evidence. Muller sat near a window with a paper on his lap, looking the least interested of anybody in the proceedings. For a moment there was complete silence in the room, which was broken in a rather unusual manner. A deep voice, more like a growl, although it had a queer strain of comic good nature in it, began the proceedings with the remark, "Well, now say, what do you want of me, anyway?" The commissioner looked at the man in astonishment, then turned aside, that the prisoner might not notice his smile. But he might have spared himself the trouble, for Muller, the clerk, and the 2 policemen at the door were all on a broad grin. Then the commissioner pulled himself together again and began with his usual official gravity. "It is I who ask questions here. Is it possible that you do not know this? You look to me as if you had had experience in police courts before." The commissioner gazed at the prisoner with eyes that were not altogether friendly. The tramp seemed to feel this, and his own eyes dropped, while the good-natured impertinence in his bearing disappeared. It was evidently the last remains of his intoxication. He was now quite sober. "What is your name?" asked the commissioner. "Johann Knoll." "Where were you born?" "Near Brunn." "Your age?" I'll be 40 next Christmas." "Your religion?" "Well, you can see I'm no Jew, can't you?" "You will please answer my questions in a proper manner. This impertinence will not make things easier for you." "All right, sir," said the tramp humbly. "I am a Catholic." "You have been in prison before." This was scarcely a question. "No, sir," said Knoll firmly. "What is your business?" "I don't know what to say, sir," answered Knoll, shrugging his shoulders. "I've done a lot of things in my life. I'm a cattle drover and a lumberman, and Did you learn any trade?" "No, sir, I never learned anything." "Do you mean to tell me that without having learned any trade you've gotten through life thus far honestly?" "Oh, I've worked hard enough. I've worked good and hard sometimes." "The last few days particularly, eh?" "Why, no, sir, not these last days. I was a drover on a transport of pigs. We brought 'em down from Hungary, 200 of 'em, to the slaughter-house here." "When was that?" That was Monday." "This last Monday?" "Yes, sir." "And then you went to Hietzinger?" "Yes, sir, that's right." "Why did you go to Hietzinger?" "Why, see here, sir, if I'd gone to Ottakring, then I suppose you would have asked me why did I go to Ottakring. I just went to Hietzinger. A fellow has to go somewhere. You don't stay in the same spot all the time, do you?" Again the commissioner turned his head, and another smile went through the room. This Hietzinger murderer had a sense of humor. "Well, then, we'll go to Hietzinger again, in our minds at least," said the commissioner, turning back to Knoll when he had controlled his merriment. "You went there on Monday, then, and the day was coming to an end. What did you do when you reached Hietzinger?" "I looked for a place to sleep." "Where did you look for a place to sleep?" "Why, in Hietzinger." "That is not definite enough." "Well, in a garden." "You were trespassing, you mean?" "Why, yes, sir. There wasn't anybody that seemed to want to invite me to dinner or give me a place to sleep. I just had to look out for myself." "You evidently know how to look out for yourself at the cost of others, a heavy cost." The commissioner's easy tone had changed to sternness. Knoll felt this, and a sharp gleam shot out from his dull little eyes, while the tone of his voice was gruff and impertinent again as he asked, "What do you mean by that?" "You know well enough. You had better not waste any more time, but tell us at once how you came into possession of this purse." "It's my purse," Knoll answered with calm impertinence. "I got it the way most people get it. I bought it." "This purse?" The commissioner emphasized both words distinctly. "This purse? Yes," answered the tramp, with a perfect imitation of Riedau's voice. "Why shouldn't I have bought this purse just like any other?" "Because you stole this purse from the man whom you murdered," was the commissioner's reply. There was another moment of dead silence in the room. The commissioner and Muller watched intently for any change of expression in the face of the man who had just had such an accusation hurled at him. Even the clerk and the two policemen at the door were interested to see what would happen. Knoll's calm impertinence vanished, a deadly pallor spread over his face, and he seemed frozen to stone. He attempted to speak, but was not able to control his voice. His hands were clenched, and tremors shook his gaunt but strong-muscled frame. "When did I murder anybody?" he gasped finally in a hoarse croak. "You'll have to prove it to me that I am a murderer." "That is easily proved. Here is one of the proofs," said Riedau coldly, pointing to the purse. "The purse and the watch of the murdered man are fatal witnesses against you." "The watch? I haven't any watch. Where should I get a watch?" "You didn't have one until Monday, possibly. I can believe that. But you were in possession of a watch between the evening of Monday the 27th and the morning of Wednesday the 29th. Knoll's eyes dropped again, and he did not trust himself to speak. "Well, you do not deny this statement?" "No, I can't," said Knoll, trying to control his voice. "You must have the watch yourself now, or else you wouldn't be so certain about it." "Ah, you see, I thought you'd had experience with police courts before," said the commissioner amiably. "Of course I have the watch already. The man who you sold it to this morning knew by 3 o'clock this afternoon where this watch came from. He brought it here at once, and gave us your description. A very exact description. The man will be brought here to identify you tomorrow. We must send for him anyway, to return his money to him. He paid you 52 gulden for the watch, and how much money was in the purse that you took from the murdered man?" 3 gulden 85. "That was a very small sum for which to commit a murder." Knoll groaned and bit his lips until they bled. Commissioner von Riedau raised the paper that covered the watch and continued. "You presumably recognized that the chain on which this watch was hung was valueless, also that it could be easily recognized. Did you throw it away, or have you it still?" "I threw it in the river." "That will not make any difference. We do not need the chain. We have quite enough evidence without it. The purse, for instance. You thought, I suppose, that it was just a purse like 1,000 others, but it is not. This purse is absolutely individual and easily recognized because it is mended in one spot with yellow thread. The thread has become loosened and hangs down in a very noticeable manner. It was this yellow thread on the purse, which he happened to see by chance, that showed the dealer Goldstam who it was that had entered his store." Knoll stood quite silent, staring at the floor. Drops of perspiration stood out on his forehead, some of them rolling like tears down his cheek. The commissioner rose from his seat and walked slowly to where the prisoner stood. He laid one hand on the man's shoulder and said in a voice that was quite gentle and kind again, "Johann Knoll, do not waste your time or ours in thinking up useless lies. You are almost convicted of this crime now. You have already acknowledged so much that there is but little more for you to say. If you make an open confession, it will be greatly to your advantage." Again the room was quiet while the others waited for what would happen. For a moment the tramp stood silent. with the commissioner's right hand resting on his shoulder. Then there was a sudden movement, a struggle and a shout, and the two policemen had overpowered the prisoner and held him firmly. Müller rose quickly and sprang to his chief's side. Riedau had not even changed color, and he said calmly, "Oh, never mind, Müller. Sit down again. The man had handcuffs on, and he is quite quiet now. I think he has sense enough to see that he is only harming himself by his violence." The commissioner returned to his desk, and Müller went back to his chair by the window. The prisoner was quiet again, although his face wore a dark flush, and the veins on throat and forehead were swollen thick. He trembled noticeably, and the heavy drops besprinkled his brow. I have something to say, sir," he began. "But first I want to beg your pardon." "Oh, never mind that. I am not angry when a man is fighting for his life, even if he doesn't choose quite the right way," answered the commissioner calmly, playing with a lead pencil. Knoll's expression was defiant now. He laughed harshly and began again. "What I'm telling you now is the truth, whether you believe it or not. I didn't kill the man. I took the watch and purse from him. I thought he was drunk. If he was killed, I didn't do it." "He was killed by a shot." "A shot? Why, yes, I heard a shot, but I didn't think any more about it. I didn't think there was anything doing. I thought somebody was shooting a cat, or else—" "Oh, don't bother to invent things. It was a man who was shot at, the man whom you robbed. But go on. Go on. I am anxious to hear what you will tell me." Knoll's hands clenched to fists, and his eyes glowed in hate and defiance. Then he dropped them to the floor again and began to talk slowly in a monotonous tone that sounded as if he were repeating a lesson. His manner was rather unfortunate and did not tend to induce belief in the truth of his story. The gist of what he said was as follows. He had reached Hietzinger on Monday evening about 8 o'clock. He was thirsty as usual and had about 2 gulden in his possession, his wages for the last day's work. He turned into a tavern in Hietzinger and ate and drank until his money was all gone, and he had not even enough left to pay for a night's lodging. But Knoll was not worried about that. He was accustomed to sleeping out of doors, and as this was a particularly fine evening, there was nothing in the prospect to alarm him. He set about finding a suitable place where he would not be disturbed by the guardians of the law. His search led him by chance into a newly opened street. This suited him exactly. The fences were easy to climb, and there were several little summer houses in sight which made much more agreeable lodgings than the ground under a bush. And above all, the street was so quiet and deserted that he knew it was just the place for him. He had never been in the street before and did not know its name. He passed the 4 houses at the end of the street, he was on the left sidewalk, and then he came to 2 fenced-in building lots. These interested him. He was very agile, raised himself up on the fences easily, and took stock of the situation. One of the lots did not appeal to him particularly, but the second one did. It bordered on a large garden, in the middle of which he could see a little house of some kind. It was after sunset, but he could see things quite plainly yet, for the air was clear and the moon was just rising. He saw also that in the vacant lot adjoining the garden, a lot which appeared to have been a garden itself once, there was a sort of shed. It looked very much damaged, but appeared to offer shelter sufficient for a fine night. The shed stood on a little raise of the ground near the high iron fence that protected the large garden. Knoll decided that the shed would make a good place to spend the night. He climbed the fence easily and walked across the lot. When he was just settling himself for his nap, he heard the clock on the nearby church strike 9. The various drinks he had had for supper put him in a mood that would not allow him to get to sleep at once. The bench in the old shed was decidedly rickety and very uncomfortable, and as he was tossing about to find a good position, a thought came into his mind which he acknowledged was not a commendable one. It occurred to him that if he pursued his investigations in the neighborhood a little further, he might be able to pick up something that would be of advantage to him on his wanderings. His eyes and his thoughts were directed towards the handsome house which he could see beyond the trees of the old garden. The moon was now well up in the sky, and it shone brightly on the mansard roof of the fine old mansion. The windows of the long wing which stretched out towards the garden glistened in the moonbeams, and the light-colored wall of the house made a bright background for the dark mask of trees waving gently in the night breeze. Knoll's little shed was sufficiently raised on its hillock for him to have a good view of the garden. There was no door to the shed, and he could see the neighboring property clearly from where he lay on his bench. While he lay there watching, he saw a woman walking through the garden. He could see her only when she passed back of or between the lower shrubs and bushes. As far as he could see, she came from the main building and was walking towards a pretty little house which lay in the center of the garden. Knoll had imagined this house to be the gardener's dwelling, and as it lay quite dark, he supposed the inmates were either asleep or out for the evening. It had been this house which he was intending to honor by a visit, but seeing the woman walking towards it, he decided it would not be safe to carry out his plan just yet a while. A few moments later he was certain that this last decision had been a wise one, for he saw a man come from the main building and walk along the path the woman had taken. "No, nothing doing there," thought Knoll, and concluded he had better go to sleep. He could not remember just how long he may have dozed, but it seemed to him that during that time he had heard a shot. It did not interest him much. He supposed someone was shooting at a thieving cat or at some small night animal. He did not even remember whether he had been really sound asleep before he was aroused by the breaking down of the bench on which he lay. The noise of it, more than the shock of the short fall, awoke him, and he sprang up in alarm and listened intently to hear whether anyone had been attracted by it. His first glance was towards the building behind the garden. There was no sound nor no light in the garden house, but there was a light in the main building. While the tramp was wondering what hour it might be, the church clock answered him by 10 loud strokes. His head was already aching from the wine, and he did not feel comfortable in the draughty old building. He came out from it, crept along to the spot where he had climbed the fence before, and after listening carefully and hearing nothing on either side, he climbed back to the road. The street lay silent and empty, which was just what he was hoping for. He held carefully to the shadow thrown by the high board fence over which he had climbed until he came to its end. Then he remembered that he hadn't done anything wrong and stepped out boldly into the moonlight. The moon was well up now, and the street was almost as light as day. Knoll was attracted by the queer shadows thrown by a big elder tree, waving its long branches in the wind. As he came nearer, he saw that part of the shadow was no shadow at all, but was the body of a man lying in the street near the bush. "I thought sure he was drunk," was the way Knoll described it. "I've been like that myself often, until somebody came along and found me." When he came to this spot in his story, he halted and drew a long breath. Commissioner von Riedau had begun to make some figures on the paper in front of him, then changed the lines until the head of a pretty woman in a fur hat took shape under his fingers. "Well, go on," he said, looking with interest at his drawing and improving it with several quick strokes. Johann Knoll continued. "Then the devil came over me, and I thought I'd better take this good opportunity. Well, I did. The man was lying on his back, and I saw a watch chain on his dark vest. I bent over him and took his watch and chain. Then I felt around in his pocket and found his purse. And then I felt sorry for him lying out in the open road like that, and I thought I'd lift him up and put him somewhere where he could sleep it off more convenient. But I didn't see there was a little ditch there, and I stumbled over it and dropped him. It's a good thing he's so drunk that even this don't wake him up, I thought, and ran off. Then I thought I heard something moving, and I was scared stiff, but there was nothing in the street at all. I thought I had better take to the fields, though, and I crossed through some corn and then out onto another street. Finally, I walked into the city, stayed there till this morning, sold the watch, then went to Pressburg." "So that's the way it was," said the commissioner, pushing his drawing away from him and motioning to the policeman at the door. "You may take this man away now," he said in a voice of cool indifference, without looking at the prisoner. Knoll's head drooped, and he walked out quietly between his two guards. The clock on the office wall struck 11. "Dear me, what a lot of time that man wasted," said the commissioner, putting the report of the proceedings, the watch and the purse, in a drawer of his desk. "When anybody has been almost convicted of a crime, it's really quite unnecessary to invent such a long story." A few minutes later the room was empty, and Müller, as the last of the group, walked slowly down the stairs. He was in such a brown study that he scarcely heard the commissioner's friendly "good night," nor did he notice that he was walking down the quiet street under a star-gilded sky. Almost convicted, almost. Almost? Müller's lips murmured while his head was full of a chaotic rush of thought, dim pictures that came and went, something that seemed to be on the point of bringing light into the darkness, then vanishing again. Almost, but not quite. There is something here I must find out first. What is it? I must know. End of chapter 6.